In May 2013, Sir Alex Ferguson walked away from Manchester United after 26 years in charge. During that time, he built one of the greatest dynasties football had ever seen. 13 Premier League titles, 2 Champions League trophies, and a culture of winning that defined the club for a generation. His final act was fitting. On May 19, 2013, United finished the season as Premier League champions, drawing 5-5 with West Bromwich Albion in a chaotic but symbolic farewell. But what happened next would change the club forever. When Ferguson stepped down, he handpicked David Moyes as his successor.
David Moyes, from July the 1st, will become the new manager of Manchester United on a 6-year deal recommended to the Manchester United board by Sir Alex Ferguson.
The message was clear. This was meant to be a smooth transition, a continuation of the same philosophy. Instead, it marked the beginning of what many fans now call the post-Ferguson curse. David Moyes lasted less than 1 season before being sacked in April 2014. Ryan Giggs stepped in briefly as caretaker, but the damage had already been done. For the first time in decades, United looked lost. The club then turned to Louis van Gaal, a manager with a strong tactical reputation and a history of rebuilding teams. He did bring a trophy, the FA Cup in 2016, but the football was slow, cautious, and far from the identity fans had grown used to under Ferguson. Then came Jose Mourinho, one of the most successful managers in modern football. Under Mourinho, United won the League Cup and the Europa League in 2017. On paper, it looked like progress, but even that success couldn't hide the deeper issues inside the club. After Mourinho's departure in 2018, former player Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was appointed. At first, it felt like a return to Manchester United's DNA, attacking football, youth development, and a connection with the fans. Yet once again, the momentum faded. When he was dismissed in 2021, the club entered another period of instability. Michael Carrick briefly stepped in, followed by Ralph Rangnick as interim manager. Each knew an Amorim in November 2024. Once again, optimism returned, and once again it didn't last. By January 2026, he was gone, and Carrick had returned for a second time as interim manager. And this is the core problem. Since Ferguson retired, United have had 6 permanent managers and multiple interim coaches. Each one arrived with a different philosophy, a different tactical system, and a different vision for the club. The result? A decade of constant rebuilding, without ever truly rebuilding. What once looked like a smooth transition after Ferguson has instead become one of the longest identity crises in modern football. And that instability is where United's struggles truly begin. The recruitment disaster. If the managerial instability explains part of Manchester United's decline, the transfer strategy explains the rest. Because since Sir Alex Ferguson retired in 2013, Manchester United hasn't just spent money. They've spent a staggering amount of IT. In fact, by early 2026, the club has spent over £2 billion on transfers. £2 billion. That makes Manchester United one of the biggest spenders in world football during that period. And yet despite that financial power, the club has struggled to compete consistently for the Premier League title. When you look at the numbers more closely, the problem becomes even clearer. Manchester United's net spending since 2013 is over £1.2 billion, the highest in world football during that time. And when you compare that spending to the trophies won in the same period, the results are shocking. Since Ferguson left, United have won just a handful of major trophies, including an FA Cup, a Europa League, and a couple of domestic cups. When you break it down financially, that means Manchester United has effectively spent around £300 million for every major trophy they've lifted since 2013. And that's where the idea of expensive mediocrity, Pogba, for example, when he returned to Old Trafford in 2016 for a then world record fee of £89 million, he was supposed to become the centerpiece of a new era. But across multiple managers and multiple tactical systems, Pogba never truly found a fixed role. Was he a deep midfielder? An attacking playmaker? A box-to-box engine? The answer seemed to change every season. Then there's Antony, signed by Erik ten Hag for £85 million. Antony was brought in specifically for Ten Hag's high-pressing tactical system. But the Premier League proved far more physical and demanding than expected, and by 2025 the club had sold him for a massive financial loss. Jadon Sancho tells a similar story. At Borussia Dortmund, Sancho was one of the most exciting young wingers in Europe. But when he arrived at Manchester United for £73 million, he joined a team that lacked the overlapping fullbacks and quick transitions that had made him so dangerous in Germany. Without the right structure around him, his strengths were neutralized. Angel Di Maria's case may have been the most dramatic. Signed for nearly £60 million, he arrived as a global superstar fresh from winning the Champions League with Real Madrid. But under Louis van Gaal's rigid, possession-heavy system, Di Maria looked uncomfortable almost immediately. After just one season, he left the club. And then there was Alexis Sanchez, that a player known for his relentless intensity and attacking style, joined a Manchester United team that was becoming increasingly defensive under Jose Mourinho. On top of that, his enormous wages reportedly caused tension inside the dressing room. These weren't just bad transfers. They were symptoms of a deeper problem. Because every Manchester United, Jose Mourinho preferred physical, defensive players. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer wanted a younger, counter-attacking team built around pace. Erik ten Hag then tried to recreate elements of his Ajax system by signing players familiar with his style. And later, Ruben Amorim attempted to implement a rigid 3-4-3 formation with a squad that had been built for an entirely different tactical setup. Each manager arrived with a new vision. Each manager bought new players. And each time the manager left, the next coach inherited a squad that didn't fit their own system. The result was what many analysts now describe as a Frankenstein squad, a collection of players built for completely different football philosophies. And because there was no consistent sporting structure guiding recruitment for most of this period, Manchester United found themselves stuck in an endless cycle. New manager, new transfers, new rebuild, but never a true long-term plan. More than a decade after Sir Alex Ferguson's departure, Manchester United remain one of the richest clubs in world football. But instead of building sustained success, they have spent. Before Pep Guardiola officially arrived in 2016, the club's ownership had already begun preparing for his style of football. Recruitment, academy development, and even coaching staff were aligned to support a specific tactical philosophy. Possession football, high technical intelligence, players comfortable in tight spaces. So when Guardiola arrived, he wasn't starting from scratch. He was simply stepping into a system that had already been designed to support his ideas. The result? More than 6 Premier League titles and a squad capable of playing the same football even when the biggest stars are rotated. Liverpool followed a similar path. Under Jurgen Klopp, the club developed a clear tactical identity built around gegenpressing, intensity, and relentless attacking transitions. When Klopp eventually stepped away, Liverpool didn't abandon that philosophy. Instead, they transitioned to Arne Slot, a manager capable of evolving the same style rather than replacing it entirely. The system remained. The identity stayed intact. Arsenal, meanwhile, committed fully to the Arteta project. For 2 difficult seasons, the club cleared out players who didn't fit the system and rebuilt the squad around young, tactically disciplined footballers. Today, Arsenal play with a level of structure where every player understands their positioning down to the smallest detail. A team designed around a philosophy. And then there's Manchester United. Since 2013, the club has operated under what can only be described as a manager of the year cycle. Each new manager arrives with a completely different football Bible. Jose Mourinho wanted physically dominant players capable of controlling games defensively. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer preferred fast counter-attacking football built around speed and transitions. Erik ten Hag attempted to recreate elements of his Ajax system with technically gifted players comfortable in possession. And later, Ruben Amorim attempted to impose a rigid 3-4-3 structure on a squad that had been assembled for an entirely different tactical setup. The result is what many now call a Frankenstein squad, a team made up of players designed for completely different systems. Some suited for possession football, some suited for defensive blocks, some suited for counterattacks, and very few capable of fitting all 3. At successful clubs, there is always a guiding principle, a North Star that shapes every decision. At Manchester City and Arsenal, that North Star is the style of play. Managers come and go, but the philosophy remains at Manchester United. However, the North Star has often been something else entirely. Commercial power, big names, global branding, which is why signings like Paul Pogba or Cristiano Ronaldo's second return often felt driven as much by marketing impact as tactical necessity. And when the pressure of Old Trafford begins to rise, that identity crisis becomes even more visible. Managers who arrive with bold philosophies often abandon them after just a few difficult results, switching into survival modes simply to keep their jobs. Even the recent attempt to rebuild the club's sporting structure has struggled to gain stability. In early 2026, despite the new Ineos ownership structure, sporting director Dan Ashworth departed after only a few months, while Ruben Amorim's tenure ended shortly after failing to implement his tactical system. Once again, the cycle repeated. And as of today, Manchester United find themselves in a familiar position. Another interim manager, another search for a long-term solution. Michael Carrick currently steadies the ship while the club begins the process of finding yet another permanent coach. Meanwhile, their rivals continue to thrive because their systems have become almost automatic. At Arsenal or Manchester City, players understand their roles so deeply that they could almost play the system with their eyes closed. It's a luxury Manchester United hasn't experienced since the days of Sir Alex Ferguson. And lastly, there is something even deeper behind Manchester United's constant instability. The pressure of the Manchester United name. Because managing Manchester United is not like managing any other football club in the world. As of March 2026, we have already seen the cycle repeat itself once again. Ruben Amorim was dismissed in January after only 14 months in charge, and Michael Carrick has returned as interim manager while the club searches for yet another permanent solution. And that situation highlights a simple truth. Rebuilding Manchester United is far harder than rebuilding almost any other club in modern football. The first reason is what many call the ghost of Ferguson. At clubs like Arsenal or Manchester City, the project itself is the star. The manager is simply the person responsible for executing the plan. But at Manchester United, every new manager arrives with a completely different expectation. They are expected to be the savior. Every appointment is immediately compared to the 26-year dynasty that Sir Alex Ferguson built at Old Trafford. And because that era was so dominant, the standard has become almost impossible to replicate. If a manager doesn't begin to show signs of Ferguson-like success within a year, the narrative begins almost instantly. Is he the right man for the job? Is he good enough for Manchester United? And that comparison trap becomes even more complicated because the club is deeply attached to its history. Manchester United has always celebrated a specific identity: attacking football, young players coming through the academy, dramatic late goals. It's one of the most beautiful traditions in football. But sometimes that tradition becomes a cage. Managers who try to modernize the team with more pragmatic approaches, like Jose Mourinho or Ruben Amorim, often face criticism for not playing the United way, even when their tactics are designed to stabilize the team. Then there is the financial bullseye that sits permanently over Old Trafford, £85 million, and Harry Maguire for £80 million. And when a player arrives with that kind of price tag, expectations become brutal. There is no adjustment period, no patience. If an £80 million signing struggles for a few months, the word flop begins to appear in headlines almost immediately. And once that narrative begins, it affects everything: the player's confidence, the fans' patience, and the manager's credibility. But perhaps the most dangerous problem of all is the paradox between winning immediately and rebuilding properly. Manchester United is not just a football club. It is also a global business empire with enormous commercial partnerships and sponsorship agreements. Many of those deals are tied to Champions League participation. If the club fails to qualify for Europe's biggest competition, there are financial consequences, including reduced sponsorship payments. While the team clearly needs a long-term rebuild, the club's business model demands instant success. And that creates a cycle of panic. If the team looks like it might miss the top four by December, the board often presses the panic button. The manager is dismissed in the hope that a new appointment will create a short-term bounce. That pressure is one of the key reasons Ruben Amorim lost his job in January 2026. The board believed the top four race was slipping media spotlight. Manchester United is arguably the most talked-about football club on the planet. When Manchester City loses a match, it might become a headline for a day. When Manchester United loses, it becomes... And that constant noise eventually reaches the dressing room. Players feel it, managers feel it, and it creates an environment where even one bad week can feel like the entire project is collapsing. All of this leads to what many analysts now call the United cycle. A cycle driven by two powerful forces pulling the club in opposite directions. On one side, there is the romantic vision of Manchester United, the desire to return to the dominance of the 1990s and early 2000s. On the other side, there is the corporate reality, a global business that demands immediate results to satisfy sponsors, shareholders, and commercial partners. Until those two worlds find balance, the pattern will likely continue. Managers will arrive as saviors. Expectations will rise instantly. And when those expectations inevitably collide with reality, the savior will be replaced. And the cycle institution torn between its historic identity and the modern demands of elite football. Meanwhile, their biggest rivals have moved in the opposite direction. Manchester City built a system that survives beyond individual players. Liverpool created a tactical culture that continues even after major changes. Arsenal committed to a long-term rebuild and trusted the process when things looked difficult. Manchester United. But one thing is certain. Until Manchester United finally chooses a long-term football identity and commits to it, the cycle we've seen since 2013 may continue to repeat itself.